Viktor was just an ordinary taxi driver until the night the Russian diplomat got into his cab and recognized him. "Ambassador Petrov?" he whispered in shock, because Viktor Petrov was once one of the most respected names in international diplomatic circles 20 years ago. The streets of downtown never truly slept, and neither did city cab company. Yellow taxis moved through the arteries of the city like blood cells, carrying stories, secrets, and strangers from one corner of life to another. Viktor Kozlov had been one of these drivers for 18 years. Car number 247, always immaculately clean, always on time, always courteous. At 58, he was the kind of driver passengers requested by name: quiet, professional, and safe. He spoke when spoken to, knew every shortcut in the city, and never asked personal questions. In return, his passengers never asked about his life either. It was a perfect arrangement that had worked for nearly 2 decades. But some secrets are too big to stay buried forever. Viktor's shift started at 6 p.m. every weekday. He'd inspect his cab, check the GPS, organize his paperwork with military precision, and begin his rounds: airport pickups, hotel runs, late dinners, business meetings. He'd seen it all. His English was excellent, though accented. Passengers sometimes asked where he was from, and he'd simply say, "Eastern Europe," and change the subject. He was skilled at deflecting personal questions without seeming rude. Other drivers at City Cab respected him. "Viktor gets the difficult passengers," dispatch would say. "Corporate clients, foreign visitors, VIPs who want discretion." He had a reputation for handling delicate situations with perfect professionalism. But none of them knew why Viktor was so good with diplomats, international business people, and foreign dignitaries. They just assumed he was naturally suited for the work. It was a Tuesday evening when the call came in. "Airport pickup, international terminal, VIP passenger, diplomatic immunity plates," the dispatcher announced. Viktor acknowledged and headed toward the airport. The passenger was waiting outside customs, a tall man in an expensive coat, speaking rapidly in Russian on his phone. Viktor pulled up and got out to help with the luggage, as he always did, for VIP clients. As the passenger settled into the back seat, he gave an address to an upscale hotel downtown. Viktor nodded and began driving. The man continued his phone conversation in Russian, discussing what sounded like trade negotiations. Viktor drove in his usual professional silence, but he understood every word. The passenger was Dmitry Volkov, a trade attaché negotiating a complex international agreement. Viktor recognized the diplomatic language, the subtle tensions, the careful word choices that revealed so much more than they said. As they neared downtown, Viktor made a comment in perfect Russian. "The construction on Fifth Avenue will add 10 minutes to the embassy route tomorrow morning." The passenger stopped mid-sentence and looked up at Viktor in the rearview mirror. "You speak Russian?" Volkov said, switching languages. "Yes, sir," Viktor replied, still focused on driving. "Your accent, it's Moscow. Educated, not immigrant Russian." Volkov studied Viktor's reflection in the mirror more carefully. "What's your surname?" Viktor hesitated for just a moment. "Kozlov." There was a long pause. Then Volkov leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Kozlov? Viktor Kozlov? No, that's not—" "Wait." His eyes widened. "Viktor Petrov? Ambassador Viktor Petrov?" Viktor's hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "You're mistaken, sir. I'm just a taxi driver." But Volkov was already pulling out his phone, scrolling through what looked like diplomatic contact lists. "My God, it is you. Viktor Petrov. I was junior staff in Geneva when you mediated the Baltic trade dispute in 2003. You saved that entire negotiation." Viktor pulled over and parked. He turned to face his passenger. "That was a very long time ago, Mr. Volkov, but you were one of our best ambassadors." Volkov said, his voice filled with disbelief. The Baltic mediation, the cultural exchange programs, the refugee negotiations. Your name is still mentioned in diplomatic training courses. Viktor smiled sadly. Flattering, but those days are over. What happened? Why are you? Volkov gestured around the taxicab. Viktor was quiet for a long moment, watching the city lights reflect off his windshield. Political changes, new administrations bring new priorities, new faces. When the regime shifted in 2004, many of us who had served under the previous government found ourselves unwelcome. But surely another country would have. I was offered positions, Viktor interrupted. But I was tired, Mr. Volkov. Tired of the games, the maneuvering, the endless compromises. I had spent 20 years speaking for my country, and I forgot how to speak for myself. Volkov shook his head. So, you became a taxi driver? I became someone who helps people get where they need to go. Viktor corrected. It's not so different from diplomacy, actually. You listen, you solve problems, you bridge distances between people who might not otherwise understand each other. Do you miss it? Volkov asked. Viktor considered the question carefully. I miss the good parts. The moments when you could actually help. When negotiation meant building bridges instead of walls. But not the politics. Not the pressure. He gestured toward the city around them. Here, I meet real people. A mother rushing to the hospital, students trying to make it to graduation, elderly couples celebrating anniversaries. Their problems are immediate, human, solvable, and no one knows who you are. A few people have recognized me over the years, other diplomats mainly, but they understand discretion. Viktor started the engine again. Shall I take you to your hotel? As they drove through the city, Volkov looked at Viktor with new eyes. You know, I have a trade negotiation tomorrow, 3 parties. Very complicated cultural sensitivities. If you ever wanted to consult, thank you. But no, Viktor said firmly. That part of my life is closed. But word spread, as it always does in diplomatic circles. Within a week, Viktor found his passenger list changing. Foreign business people specifically requested him. Embassy staff would ask for the Russian-speaking driver. Cultural attachés would strike up conversations during their rides. Viktor realized he was building bridges again, just in a different way. A confused Japanese businessman trying to navigate a merger. A French cultural minister lost in American business customs. A Nigerian trade representative struggling with regional dialects. In the backseat of Taxi 247, Viktor Kozlov, formerly Ambassador Viktor Petrov, was still doing what he did best, helping people understand each other. Sarah, the night dispatcher, noticed the change. Viktor, you've become the UN of taxi drivers. What's your secret? Viktor smiled as he headed out for another airport pickup. No secret. I just listen and try to help people get where they need to go. As he drove through the city lights, Viktor realized something he hadn't expected. He was more fulfilled now than he'd ever been as an ambassador, because instead of representing one country's interests, he was serving everyone who needed help. Sometimes the most important diplomacy happens not in marble halls and conference rooms, but in the back seat of a taxi at 2 a.m., when someone just needs to be understood. Viktor Petrov had given up his title, his status, and his corner office. But Viktor Kozlov had found something better, the freedom to help anyone who needed it, without politics, without agendas, without borders. In the end, the best ambassadors aren't those who speak for governments,